Hello, today is May 6th and this is El Paso Liberty Group's interviews with the candidates running for mayor of El Paso. My name is James Peinado and today I'm joined with Jorge Artalejo. How are you doing, Jorge?
Good, James. How are you?
Doing pretty awesome. We're down here at the Percolator. We talked a whole bunch of economics and things here and there, kind of staying away from El Paso, but now it's time to get to talking about El Paso and what we hope to do with it.
Great. Before we do that, I just want to comment on some specific issues that we raised in our discussion. And it is just outrage to learn that the African continent, in nations that are attached to it, that there still are issues of labor. And that is just a shame. And it's more of a shame that our own government out of our capital city, Washington, D.C., hasn't specifically addressed these concerns, whereby it was a huge conflict was engaged in amongst ourselves to this effect, and still not having, it seems, the fortitude and thereby the courage to ask at this practice that was prohibited because of the outcome of this conflict isn't also prohibited in these nations where it's still practiced to this day, to this hour.
It's indeed very upsetting. We were talking just about free trade, just for a little bit to catch you guys up on, and I was kind of going over the nuances and the extents of free trade and whatnot, and I did bring up that the Ivory Coast, there are slave plantations where they raise cocoa plants, but they use slave labor. I don't know specifically what the U.S. government's stance on it is, but it would definitely be interesting to look into. Thank you for commenting on that.
You're welcome. I'm now ready to discuss our own local issues.
Yep. So, just so you guys know, El Paso Liberty Group is a group of free-minded individuals living in El Paso who got together and wanted to bring both national issues that are of importance, but also we wanted to bring to bear important things that should be talked about at the local level. And so that's why this election is very important, and we all applaud you, Jorge, for taking it upon yourself to run.
I very much appreciate that. All the applause that comes my direction out of the endeavors that are controversial with respect to this election are fully appreciated, especially when they come from a group such as yourself that realize the significance and importance of what it is to in fact participate in a free election process as we enjoy here in the United States with respect to our position as a city within these United States.
So, I guess the first of a couple questions we'd like to ask you is just what do you see as, what should El Pasoans look to for their city government to accomplish? What is the purpose of city local government?
Well, the purpose of city government is to stand on behalf of the individuals who have elected it to position. Although times there are many individuals who don't actually come out and vote, we take it for granted those individuals who do in fact vote are voting their interests that are in league with those individuals who don't come out and vote. So it is then that the elected government will speak for those who have voted for it in the hopes that those who have voted for it in turn have spoken for those who cannot. And thereby we have to undertake the effort as elected members of the body politic to in fact represent the elected interests that are voiced in the electoral process, so that it is that those who give the vote in fact are the government, and the government isn't outside of those who have given it the legitimacy that is given to it by way of the vote that occurs. And it is then that the local government, particularly at the level in which this election is occurring, municipality, that it is a fundamental level of all government in the United States. We know that the historical legacy of our Constitution is blessed by the efforts of individuals in Boston under the leadership of Sam Adams himself, who led the drive towards independence in the United States from England, then in cooperation with his brother John Adams, that it was through their individual efforts amongst members of their community then that it was that independence was granted to these colonies, that subsequently through the writing of the Constitution we now declare ourselves these United States. And therefore in this same fundamental vein of thought then this election is being conducted.
Very good. So you do speak a lot about purpose is to represent people at the local level. But would you have any thought, or would you care to comment on like what responsibilities should we look to for representation in the local level? What are the jobs that need to be performed, or what are the most important jobs to be performed by local government?
Well, we know that the whole municipality is divided in interest. There is, for example, Parks and Rec, and there are other divisions, and each of these divisions is given to a particular council member, and the council member then has the oversight of that division. And when it is that the council member neglects the oversight, then that division that is given to the council member goes wanting. And that seems to be what the case is here in El Paso, that members of council are given these divisions, but they don't care. They don't go to any of the activities that are required by that division, and because they're not actively involved in the division, then all these duties then fall back onto the office of the city manager. And with respect to that office, which is independent of the individual, it then becomes overwhelmed, and we then are encountered with controversies of the nature that are outside of the scope of the legitimacy of what municipality government is, that is given its legitimacy on account of its incorporation into that unit which we refer to as a state, which we know then is given its breath through the cooperation that is contained in our Constitution.
Very enlightening. So, and you've spoken about this before. I heard your KLAQ interview and read some things in the newspapers where you speak concerns about people not showing up to certain branches of local government so that they could get informed and better lead. Is that correct?
Yes, and I want to, at this moment, applaud all those individuals in the media who have undertaken the job of doing what I myself could not do because of the extraordinary expense involved in doing that. And therefore, through them and through the comments that I occasionally make at venues such as Commissioners Court and City Hall, where I voice my opinion when matters come to my light as to what is happening that should be happening, and thereby educating those individuals who are attuned to policy matters of our government. And in being able to do that, then I then hope to keep and bear in mind to those individuals who have been educated through their work that they have engaged in through their studies, however they came about that understanding, and then that understanding is founded on a legitimacy that they understand in principle because they acquired through that education the nature of what our form of government is, as opposed to foreign forms of government that abide outside of our constitutional government.
Gotcha. All right. And then you've covered this. I'm sure you all running in the race have covered this at length. A follow-up question to come, but real quickly, what was your opinion on strong mayoral versus city manager form of government? Which did you have a preference? Did you say? I enjoy
the decision that the electoral made with respect to the office of the city manager without controversy to who it is that currently occupies the position, because we know that subsequently each individual acquires power of the kind that she has acquired in effort then come to fade. We saw that happen with General MacArthur when he challenged the legitimacy of the office of the presidency of Harry Truman. He went off and didn't die but faded, in his own words. And that is in fact what happens to all members who come into any kind of position of authority, that eventually they will fade away, but the office itself will stand just as much as that office that General MacArthur left stands. So it will be with the office of the city manager, and therefore we have to prepare ourselves for that eventuality. And although there are controversies with respect to the current occupant of the office, I favor the decision that the electoral made with respect to that decision to place responsibility of oversight of our departments of city government in its office. However, that isn't to say that I favor the idea that the mayor no longer has a functioning authority within government, because in fact the truth is that in order for that office of city manager to properly function, it's required that the mayor have an active role in the administrative obligations imposed on the municipality with respect to its charter to oversee the functioning of the office of city manager so that it functions with the relationship to the office of the mayor properly.
There we go. That was going to be my next question. Is what would you see the role of the mayor in all this? Okay, so how would you say John Cook, our current mayor, how would you rate his performance in carrying out that role?
John Cook has a wonderful personality, and oftentimes individuals get elected into office on account of the personality. But then what happens is that the personality isn't able to ride the wave of government, and that, I think, is what has happened with Mayor Cook, is that he has been drowned in the tumult of the positioning of city government with respect to that office of city manager that was given its life with the decision made at the time it was given. And because of that, then he has taken it for granted that the city manager will act in full necessity of what the municipality is without respect to any input that he could make to it.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, moving on to maybe another question. One of the candidates, Gus Haddad, brings up smart growth quite a bit. And I was kind of curious on how you felt about smart growth regulations, overlays, or just the whole concept. Also, have you ever heard of Agenda 21 or ICLEI, out of curiosity?
Of course, it's not even conceivable that I would have heard of any of that. In fact, you having mentioned Gus Haddad's position with respect to smart growth, it's just also idea that he is voicing as part of the electoral process, that in truth I don't believe he has an actual input with respect to what it is or isn't. As far as smart growth is concerned, where it is that I understand smart growth to be that those lots that are sitting vacant have sat vacant for years and years because of the expansion of the municipality beyond its original frontiers and have gone wanting, that they should be inclusive of development before the municipality extends beyond its current limits. I'm in favor of that because I don't see how it is that a municipality is able to properly function with respect to its integrity as a municipality if there are gaps within it. What is required is the cohesiveness. We know this through the European experience, that the frontiers of the cities that were established first were established within a defined perimeter, and after the full establishment of them within these perimeters, they then extended themselves beyond them because it wasn't capable of them for them to live outside the established perimeters before they could, because of defensive nature of their existence in these lands across the Atlantic. And so it is in effect then that we have to undertake a similar endeavor to expand defensively as opposed to just expanding per se wherever we happen to follow the cow as it came to its final position.
So just so I understand that, because it wasn't too clear, like the way in which our municipality grows and develops, consideration should be made for defense? Is that what you were saying? Because I understood the Europeans, they developed their cities in a way so that they could always protect what they had developed. But are you saying that that's how we should do the same thing with El Paso, Texas, or any other cities?
That was kind of muddy, but in truth, what has happened is that in order for us to live cohesively, and we have to defend ourselves with respect to the cost of our living, as it is that when we then are extended beyond the natural perimeter, then the cost of the services municipal-wise is greater than if those costs are concentrated in a sector, which is what is necessary to have happen if we want to be in a favorable taxing position.
Gotcha. So planning should be made so that things are not developed without consideration to how are we going to bring this new development effectively, efficiently in with the rest of the current city. So some planning is required. But what if I own, say, said property that has been vacant? I bought it, and I want to develop it as I wish. I don't want to do smart growth. I think that people would be more interested in purchasing or renting land, leasing property from me if I developed it another way than smart growth, which may not be what the city government thinks is efficient for tax purposes, but it's my property. I mean, how much of a say should the property owner have in what kind of regulations he has to carry out?
None, because the developers, they come under the sway of the legitimacy of the authority that is municipality, and we hope that those who have that sway are acting in the community's interest. And the developers, they don't stand outside of the community. So it happens that they own property, but never minding that, they don't own property on the open frontier if it's part of the municipality. And because it is part of the municipality, they come under the direction of those who house that authority within the municipality. We're not going to set out to disadvantage the property owner. We're hoping to, in fact, improve the lot of the property owner generally as opposed to the individual. And when the individual owner of property feels that what he is being asked to do is encumbering to his property rights, we have to question whether in fact that's the case, or whether it's the case the property owner only looked to purchase the property to speculate on the property and thereby gain an unfair advantage over the overall interest of property as opposed to his own interest, and thereby capitalized on his speculation, and thereby leaving the community wanting for what is required for it to in fact be an effective entity of taxation.
Fair enough. Thank you. Well, a lot of the topic of debate and discussion in forums has been about trust in our local officials. There's a lot of people who brought up concerns about an oligarchy of sorts, or just people who make backdoor deals without consideration to representation, which is obviously a big tenet of what you are running for, is better representation in government and more transparency. How will you go about regaining the public's trust that you will be a better representative, that you'll be a better leader for El Paso? What do you have to offer us as mayor?
That's a very big question, James, and I hope that you bear with me in my response, because I have to preface the answer, because it seems that what is occurring is that we see that an individual has acquired an office of leadership through the election and then determines who subsequently should house the additional offices of leadership, and then goes and supports these individuals that this individual of leadership believes will act in the interest of the leadership that this individual provides. But leadership is diverse. Leadership doesn't come about through a homogeneity. It comes about through incorporation of diversity. And when we see that that is what is occurring, we have to step back and ask, why is this necessary for us to vote along a single line that isn't really a general line of leadership, and then based on that consideration decide our own considerations? And when we use a word like trust, we have to be careful of it, because trust involves historically a negative connotation. We know that when President Theodore Roosevelt acquired the presidency through the death of President McKinley, that it was then that he had to encounter those trusts that came together to advocate against the better interest of the nation through those enterprises that they put in place that combined to defeat them in the cost of what it was to transport goods at reasonable cost as opposed to extraordinary cost. And then we know then that when trust is involved, what we're looking for is, in effect, a situation where it is that those trusted by the community are acting with respect to that election, that they're not acting against that elected representation that they're giving, that they're acting to better a lot of the many, because out of many, one is our national motto, and as such, the one who acts for the many must be acting for the many as opposed to acting for another, as seems to have been the allegation made of the elected leadership positions here in our county. And thereby, when an individual who campaigns for public office uses the word trust, you have to wonder whether in fact the individual is worthy of trust or whether otherwise.
Oh, okay. I liked how that tied in at the end. There you go. I guess another thing is just that a lot of people talk about, a lot of the candidates, they talk about their strategy for bringing in businesses, and how we all, El Pasoans, we want jobs, we want prosperity, we want an influx of money. What is your philosophy on the best way to go about attracting businesses to El Paso and creating prosperity in our town?
Well, we understand that many of the positions that are advocated by others, that these positions are dated positions. That if in two of their positions worked, much as like what is thought of Keynesian economics, if it in truth was as valid as it's pretended to be, then the employment picture in the United States wouldn't be as harmed as it is, as it seems to be. And so we know that the positions that are being advocated are dated positions, that in truth that is required is personal appeal. Then in order for an individual corporate interest, and one has to bear in mind that corporate interests are imperfect, that they too have leadership that they have to speak to, and if that leadership that they speak to is endangered by their practices, then one has to wonder why they're in those positions of leadership. And if those positions that they are holding to are an endangerment to the capitalist of their company, then we have to be capable of approaching the property interests and asking them why they're pursuing a business model that doesn't function properly for them. And if it is that their participation in our economy here locally in El Paso could be bettered by them, for them, then why then can't they do it?
So, is there anything that a mayor should go about doing, or a city government should be going about doing to help prosperity in El Paso?
The first instance of responsibility on elected member to the office is to put together an economic team to advocate El Paso's position, one that is educated and one that has the will and the drive to in fact operate from the direction of the mayor, his leadership, to approach these companies that are identified, whose ability to properly align themselves to their owners can be remedied properly and bettered and addressed. And in doing so, having a capable team at his disposal, he then should be able to direct it himself without reliance on these individuals of his team to the effects that he sees to the betterment of El Paso's economy with respect to its potential lot in terms of the ability then through the avocation of El Paso to corporate America as a unit to them and ourselves one of prosperity.
There's a little bit of economics. Now to kind of a hypothetical, but based on an incident that happened recently, and one that is of much concern to liberty-minded people in El Paso. Many people in our group, everyone watched in horror. A couple weeks ago when there was the Boston bombing, and I guess a suspected terrorist had bombed people at the finish line of that marathon. But for the people who are concerned about liberty and inalienable rights, we watched with even more horror the execution by law enforcement in trying to capture the suspects, and the way in which there was a lockdown of much of the city of Boston, restrictions in movement of its citizens, and going into persons' homes without asking, or having warrants provided and holding them at gunpoint, and they come out with their hands. I don't know if you've seen videos, but they're coming out with their hands on their head as the police are searching house by house for the bad guys. And then the whole questioning. One of the suspects was killed in combat, and then the other suspect, people were questioning whether they should read him his Miranda rights or not. Maybe he should be treated as a enemy combatant, and so therefore he's not, even though he's an American citizen, he's not due his Miranda rights, which is, 4th, 5th, 6th Amendment, and any others that I'm forgetting. So let's say, hypothetically, El Paso, there was a similar incident, God forbid, and law enforcement is on the lookout for 2 people who are suspects. Likely they did it, but they're just suspects because they haven't gone through trial. How would you go about looking for some people like this? And are the actions carried out by Boston and Department of Homeland Security justified in all of this?
The situation in Boston, where it was that patriotism was given its breath, that when a situation happens like that in a city of that magnitude, one doesn't really stand back and say to those who have the official duty to ensure the safety of its members, whether they went about it in the wrong way. We do that subsequently, and we learn from that. And we hope that no situation of any kind of that type will ever occur here in our border community. But if it were, we would undertake in the same mode that was undertaken in Boston to ensure the capture of an individual who takes it upon himself to attack the democratic spirit of our country, to the extent that, out of respect for every right granted to every citizen through that addition to our general charter of government, that in it then the fundamental guarantees are provided, that no guarantee of any kind granted by way of it and by way of interpretation through the court, that they are in any essence, in any fundamental way threatened because of the behavior of an individual that is then called to account by the law enforcement that is entrusted by the community to its safety and protection.
Fair enough. And you did speak briefly in your answer just about the democratic spirit of America. It wasn't a question I had listed, but I was kind of curious. Would you consider yourselves a democracy or a republic, or anything to comment on that?
We are a democracy. However, because of our inability to go like they did in Athens and listen for hours and hours to somebody state what Athens' public policy should be, and then afterwards decide amongst those who were brought to that effort to then decide whether we should proceed along that venue or venue of opposition. That, never minding that, fundamentally and in theory, we are in truth much as they are. We do it in the process by which we elect those who then speak for us as one, and in doing that, then we then recognize that the one individual has to act in league with another individual who is also in the same position that he is with respect to election, and thereby, if the one individual In one instance is our state of Texas, and the other individual, in the other instance is the state of Louisiana. The states then come together as they did in 1787, and in adherence to their understanding, act as what are guaranteed in it republics. We then are, because of the necessity of acting with each other with terms to trade, policy that pertains to other nations, whereby we can act individually, and in terms of defensive matters that would overwhelm us if we acted individually, are a necessary union of republics. And that then is our legal nature.
Thank you for that comment. It was just out of curiosity and stuff like that. And okay, some questions that I guess were raised in my mind when I was reading just a few El Paso Times, El Paso Inc. Articles concerning you and your race. I just wanted to know, how would you evaluate the election process in El Paso for mayor and stuff like that? Like, as somebody who has now run the race, and with any good fortune, or if the people make the right decision, you'll be mayor. But how would you, looking back on the whole thing, and how the media, individuals, the schools that welcomed you guys in, the actions of parties, the actions of candidates running, how would you evaluate any concerns or things to praise about this election process, or things that we should look for better elections in the future?
When I was at one of our middle schools, one of the students, they left a book out, and it had to do with running. And I saw that the best way to run is not with the full foot. And so then when I went out to one of the high schools, I started to run like that, but I would only run the 100 yards. And when I would come in to the finish, I always had a sense of euphoria. And we now are at that point where that sense of euphoria is beginning to occur. And with respect to you having read from both the El Paso Times and the other magazine that you mentioned, that by way of them then that you learned of my candidacy, just speaks to the factor that they have undertaken to ensure that this race was a clean race, that coming down the stretch there wasn't placed on it something that would cause a delay, and looking for those delays that others might want to place on the track to an individual such as myself, that then my coming into the finish and coming over the line then is going to be one whereby it was done wisely and safely, without harm and without any prejudice or bias against me by other individuals who are also in the race with me.
I guess last question. You spoke about a little bit in the articles when I was doing a little bit of research on you. Certain concerns and issues, things like better representation. But are there any key issues that El Pasoans should be considering who to choose for mayor? Like, what are the 3 issues that they should be looking at in making their choice for who's best for El Paso?
Has the will of the popular sovereignty been respected? We have to establish that as the fundamental ground by which this election is decided. If they feel in all respect that it hasn't been the case, then they need to choose the individual who in fact advocates for it, because otherwise not to do would be just to further the purposes of an individual or group who seek to cause to us as a community, believing that the community doesn't have any genuine understanding of what the popular sovereignty is to its demise. And secondly, I would say that the importance of stabilizing the rupture that exists here in the core of our city of El Paso, where we see that Pioneer Plaza in all its historical significance. And I don't want to spend more than a moment here in reflection that it's not advanced, it's not respected, that if one actually visits the site, you see what a horrendous state of affairs it is, and it's in that condition because the city has chosen it to be as such. And then one wonders whether or not the purpose in the demolition of City Hall didn't have a reason other than the reason that they gave, that because City Hall stood as a symbol of government here on the border, that people seem to think that our border relations are such that they're injurious to us as a people because of our position, that's not the case, that we are respected because of our position by our neighbor to us, the northern state of Chihuahua, who has situations that are political, that it has to look to leadership, and we hope to provide that leadership from our city. So we hope that that's not the case for the demolition of City Hall. And finally, we would hope that the full participation, that the appearance of individuals who are elected to office come to the forefront. I saw that when the Arbor Day ceremony was held at Mijo Park, that the one who oversaw it was the director of Parks and Rec, and I respect her in her position as such, but really, couldn't the elected member of that district also have been there? But in fact, she wasn't there. A member of her staff was there, and then to make matters more terrible, the lack of her presence was that the director of Parks and Rec saw a member of Representative Gonzalez staff there, and we all know Representative Gonzalez. She was in papers recently because of the mishap that befell her, as it were, that we know her by sight and reputation. And to address a member of our community, by chance African American, as Naomi, thinking her to be Naomi Gonzalez, just doesn't turn the tide, unfortunately.
Well, thank you very much, Jorge, for your time, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you, James, and thank you to your group.
This is El Paso Liberty Group. We'll be posting these interviews, and you can check us out on Facebook. You can like El Paso Liberty Group, or follow us on Twitter, El Paso Liberty. And we also have a podcast. So come check us out, Be First in Media. We do it every Sunday. But y'all have a great El Paso day. This is James signing off.